mentioned the sort of the pharmaceutical sort of industry. How much of a role do they play in the current dogma?
A huge role. And again, I don't want to come off sounding like a conspiracy theorist, because I'm not. I am the medical establishment. I'm at USC medical school now, but I used to be at UCLA, one of the two medical schools, essentially my entire career. I've, done the research. I've worked with drug companies and everything like that. But I do realize that there is a problem with influence when there's huge amounts of money at stake, and whether it's big food, which is the food industry, or big pharma, which is the drug industry, or big healthcare, which you could define as the hospital systems and the insurance systems. We have to be careful for the influence of those in our thinking, and it may not be that people intentionally want to harm someone else, but those influences are very pernicious, and we need to examine them much closer. For example, the American Heart Association they have a heart check box that they license to people, and they license it to sugar cereals as a heart healthy food, and they've received millions of dollars for that. And that's misleading, because people then feed those to their children thinking they're safe and it's good for their heart, when actually they're really not. They're really bad.
So that was shocking for me to find out that those heart healthy food, those checks, or diabetic food, those checks are actually just basically symbols or signs that you can purchase. You can buy that. The food industry actually pays money to be able to put them on their packaged foods. That was shocking for me. I truly believed in the heart healthy foods. So we have those in the UK as well, and approved by the Diabetes UK, for example, which is our equivalent of your ADA. I believed in those.
Yeah, and what you're saying, I think you've raised a really important challenge that we have in advancing an agenda of lifestyle change and taking control of our health through eating foods and exercise and this sort of thing. The problem with it is that there's not necessarily a lot of money to be made from it. So if we're up against, let's say, type 2 diabetics, they can either stop eating carbohydrates, and for most of the patients, the diabetes will go away. If you're on a carnivore diet, for most people, there's very good studies now that will go away. Or you can be prescribed insulin. Insulin will pay, and other drugs, but eventually leading up to insulin for type 2 diabetics now. And there's an industry about supplying insulin, and our healthcare system is set up about that. And even to get darker, there's a downstream industry. The people on insulin, as you mentioned, get complications of diabetes. They have a higher rate of amputations. The number one cause of amputation is diabetics. 80% of diabetics die of heart attacks. Blindness, number one cause is diabetes. So there's the whole industry has downstream benefits. And I'm not saying this is some grand plan that the deep state is organizing or anything, but it's something that we have to be aware of, that there's a lot of money to be made with certain approaches, and other approaches which may be as simple as just skip breakfast and don't eat processed foods. Actually, it's harder to make money that way, so there's less advertising money put into it, less dollars put into it. So it's an upstream challenge to make that argument for people and make them even aware of it over the noise of all the other ads that we're seeing.
Yeah, but when I talk to my group of people, sometimes in group sessions, I tell them, let's not blame the pharmaceutical companies or even the sugar manufacturing companies, because at the end, let's look at them as businesses. They are businesses. They're not interested in your health. They are businesses. They want to make profits. Once you change your outlook and look at them as pure businesses that have nothing to do with your health, then I think you understand what's happening around you. Everything becomes much clearer. So again, I think part of the sort of corrupted research that we have, especially about sugar, is you've actually these papers are still out there, papers proving that sugar, and we're talking about the sucrose, like the white fructose glucose sugar, it can be part of a very healthy diet. And when you look deeper, these papers actually are funded by the sugar industry. So of course they are not going to put out research papers saying, hey, avoid our products.
Yeah, and as you probably talked about with your guests, and we go over this in the book, that in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, there was a kind of a decision point in American nutrition. There was the McGovern hearings and sort of a national health policy, whether to eat high sugar or high fat diets, or low sugar, low carb, and low fat diets. And arguments were put in on both sides. And eventually we all know who won. It was the low fat diets that my mom and all the dietitian community and the medical community followed for the next 70 years. And, we're arguably we're paying the price for it right now. But in 2016, there was a group from UC San Francisco that Rob Lustig often mentions. I'm not sure if he was a co-author on the paper, but they did some research and they found out that back when these decisions were being made, there was a huge amount of money paid to the then chairman of the Harvard Medical School nutrition department to write articles saying how great sugar was for you and how healthy sugar was and how bad fat was. And it shows the influence of that industry, at least in that particular case. But I'm sure, it's happening in other areas, and it happens. I'm sure there's a fat industry people that are doing the same thing, but the point is we have to be especially careful about these outside influences.